Right.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our post-show Q&A with all of our presenting artists for the virtual Empower One Another. We're so excited to have everybody. We just wanted to first go around, and by saying around, Jen and I will, kind of help us share, but just to introduce everyone, give us a little like 1 to 2 line, tell us a little bit about yourself, your art, your company, which piece was yours. So I will start. My name is Gracie Baruzzi. I am the co-artistic director of Nozama Dance Collective, and my company presented tonight Becoming an Activist, an allyship project, which we created with our wonderful artist in resident, Azeb Freitas. All right, Jen,
Yes.
we'll do like a round robin. You call on the next, like we'll go back and forth.
Okay, I like that. All right, I'm Jennifer Kuhnberg. I'm director of OnStage Dance Company and obviously co-producer of Empower with Gracie. And I showed the first 2 pieces that kicked off the virtual performance, Angel by the Wings, which was an onstage piece from last year, and Astronaut, which was from my show, What is Love?
Awesome. All right, I see we're gonna go in, we have Evolve Dynamics. Do you want to both introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll start and then I'll pass it on to Lisa. So I'm Nicole. I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of Evolve Dynamics, and we presented the SIR model for infectious disease piece, and I will pass it on to Lisa now. Oh, I realize that I'm pointing. It's different on everyone's screen.
I'm Lisa. I'm the other founder of Evolve, and yeah, we presented the SIR model. Hope you enjoyed it.
All right, Jen, pick an artist, any artist.
How about Dana?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Dana. The piece that I presented is called Mother Tongues. And I don't formally have a company of any kind, but here in Boston, I am a company member on Nozama Dance Collective and Sasso and Company, but I'm also always kind of toying with other projects on the side. And my piece, just like a little shout out that my piece was created in the OnStage Dance Company choreographer's residency, which was really amazing. It's, free space and time to create and experiment with dancers. So that's what my piece came out of.
Which is the perfect follow-up. Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie Logan. I presented Reflection. A Reflection was also created in one of the OnStage residency showcase performances. So that's definitely a great opportunity for any dancers who are looking for space or want to create something new, work with new people. So I really enjoyed that process. And I'm also not a director of any kind, but I like to create work in the Boston area. And I'm also a member of Nozama Dance Collective, and I've danced with a few other companies as well.
Awesome. All righty, and let's see, how about Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I presented Selection. I don't have a company, I'm an independent artist. And I choreograph, I dance, I'm an apprentice with Kairos, and I dance for Jenny Oliver and Connections Dance Theater as well. And I teach throughout the Boston area. And I will call on Madison.
Hi, I'm Madison. My piece was titled Space. It was towards the end. This is a piece I'm creating as an independent dancer and choreographer, though I'm part of Nozama as well. This piece specifically is part of a 4-part longer piece that I'm in the midst of working on, and it was supposed to be performed a couple times earlier this year, but with coronavirus, we've bumped it back and reshaped it several times to now be a virtual performance piece.
It came out so awesome. All right, and Rachel and Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Orzada.
I'm Rachael Gnatowski.
And we're the co-founder and artistic directors of New England Ballet Theater of Connecticut. We presented our virtual summer series, which was a collaboration piece with NEVT dancers and local photographer Jeff Holcomb. It was kind of just like a breath of fresh air, like getting outside, dancing, really just like breaking through the walls of our confined space throughout. We made it in like June, so breaking out of our confined space and dancing outside. And we started our company, New England Ballet Theater of Connecticut, in January. We were supposed to have, you know, our little trial season and in the spring. And so now we've started our first season this September. We were both dancers and ballet companies throughout the country, and found that there was like a lot of things missing in the aspect of taking care of the dancers and censorship in choreography and things like that. So we started our own company to move past that and push ballet forward with choreography and treatment of our dancers mentally and physically.
Love that. I know many of us, I saw so many heads like really.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, and then we'll go to,
oh, wait, they choose.
oh, they choose.
Oh, no, I don't. I believe, I want to make sure I didn't, is anyone hiding? Well, I would love to give a really quick shout out to Azeb, who joined as I was introducing her, I think. So she's on now, so she'll be answering some questions later with all of us, but we will keep an eye out, but let's dive in. Well, because the first question is really me asking Jen to tell everyone a little bit. We'd love to just tell a little bit more about Empower One Another and how we came to put on this virtual show and kind of the path that we got to this. So Jen, how did we get here? What brought us to this show?
Well, I mean, really we got here because of you, right? So Empower really was initially the brainchild of Gracie. And I think, you know, it really grew out of our mutual love for collaboration. And that's something that I think both of us are very passionate about and, you know, seek to, you know, work towards in a lot of the different projects that we do. So if you weren't familiar with Empower before this year or before this show, we premiered it last year. And the whole concept was to pair companies together to create a new piece together. And it was, I mean, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it was a really amazing success last year. And I think it fostered a lot of partnerships that were brand new and really exciting. And our plan was to do it again this year. And we have funding from the Malden Cultural Council to do it as well. But of course, we had to pivot and do a virtual version. And you know, obviously it's sad that we couldn't have the in-person collaboration aspects that we, you know, would have loved to have. But I think the great thing about it was that, you know, it opened the doors for a lot more artists to join the project and also allowed dancers, many of you, to explore video work in a way that I think most of us don't really do or haven't really approached before. So I think it really opened the doors for us to think about, you know, how to show work in this virtual sphere in a new way.
Awesome. Yeah, it was, we wanted to still produce this show, but we were trying to think of how we could still have a collaboration aspect and how to produce empowering works. And we realized there were so many works that already existed that we wanted to have gain more exposure, but also we were so inspired to see how many of you created works specifically for this show or who filmed them for this show, which is where I'm going to start with our first question for Madison, who, as you started to tell us about space, how you really filmed this particular version for this show. So we just wanted to kind of ask you to kick us off and tell us about, you know, your process of rehearsing for this work and for producing it and what challenges you found. You know, your dancers were all wearing masks. And so kind of just tell us a little bit about the process and some of the challenges you faced.
Sure. So this piece I actually started back in May of 2019, and it started as a piece for a class. And I kind of had to, or kind of loved it so much that I wanted to adapt it for a stage piece. And over the next year, I'd worked it into being a piece that could be performed with a front-facing audience in a standard theater. I then adapted it to be in the OnStage 360 show that was then postponed and indefinitely like delayed. And then when this opportunity came up, I kind of reframed it yet again. And it actually came out really cool to have all my rehearsals be done through Zoom and working with a group of dancers that I didn't expect to be my group of dancers for this show, and kind of collaborating with them and making sure like, oh, is this spacing good for you? Let's double check everyone's masks are good, spacing's good. And choreographing with 6 feet distance between everyone has been a challenge, but also kind of fun and a new like kind of confinement for my choreography style and different process, because this was supposed to have partnering and be very tight knit and compact. So it was a huge transition and change. And then filming on location was really fun because I got to kind of engage with a new environment that isn't just a stage or a performance space. It was really unique. So
where was that? Where was that space?
That's up by the aquarium right on the harbor. So it's East India Road, or East India Row Road is the address, like the street that it was on. It's a really cool art piece by a boater and engineer. So
yeah, I love the setting of that with those like gigantic silver platforms. Really amazing use of, you know, the sort of site-specific feature of the space. And I loved how in the piece you can actually see people stopping and watching, and some people even sitting down on the ledges and watching you guys dance. I thought that was really cool.
I loved that.
It was a really great experience. People thought we were legitimately performing for them in the moment. So it was fun.
I mean, you kind of were, right?
And I know this just from us talking, but you filmed that whole thing in 4 takes? 3 takes?
Yeah, 4 takes with like, and 2 of those takes were mostly just close up trying to get certain angles for certain things. So
just like amazing. Which made me think of a follow-up for kind of everyone, like show of hands, like raise your hands if for the most part of 2020 you've been doing Zoom virtual rehearsals in like for some project. And raise your hand if they've been the most fun rehearsals you've ever had. It's been a challenge. Like, well, some of them have been really fun, but like to see that like we've all been adapting and had to not only like learn how to create in this new world, but produce, and then that Madison, you created an entire piece and a film project out of it, I think is so awesome. Did anyone have any question for Madison's piece after seeing it? We want this to definitely be very conversational and have everyone get to, you know, share, even if it's just something you observed or something you liked about it. But I need to go check out that location.
I know, I didn't even know that was there. I'm like, ooh, I want to go over there and see you.
Yeah, Rachel.
It's actually, I saw that space for the first time walking around town maybe like a week or 2 ago, and my friends and I walking, we were like, hang on to this, like someone remember that this is here, like what is this open stage? It is really amazing like how much there is outdoors in Boston, and then you add into that all the people who walk by and 100% think that stuff like that is just other people performing for them, which is really cool. And it's also more inviting than having a show inside of a theater that only theater goers or people who go to watch dance would go to. It's a really awesome choice of location.
How I found it was very similar to what you were saying. As I walked by it one day, I was like, that's a stage. But it's fun because as soon as we left, like a group of kids came in and started running around and jumping off the different pieces of it. And like as soon as a child like engages with a piece of land or art or anything like that, you can tell you're like, ah, yes, this is a spot for movement. This is great for us. It was very reassuring to watch a bunch of kids also see it as a stage.
I love that. I love that the sense of, yeah, like seeking out alternative spaces, right? Like now that we can't be in a stage. And that sort of leads me to, I want to pivot a little bit to Lisa and Nicole. You took the Zoom rehearsal kind of to the next level and, created an entire piece around that. And I'm watching it thinking like, oh my goodness, the Zoom experience was so challenging, I know, for OnStage, and I can't even imagine kind of crafting a piece, like really just diving into that experience. And so I'm curious about that decision But then also what I loved about it was that your piece is so timely. It's so specific to what's happening right now and, you know, with the pandemic and with social distancing. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear more about where that all came from and the process of putting it together.
Sure. So I was the one who edited that all together. And if anyone's trying to do that, give yourself time. It took me 2 weeks of frustration to really get that down. But we actually started a new project that we are calling our Math Methods project. And we started that in January and had premiered our first piece for it at the NACMO Boston show in February. And then everything closed down and we kind of asked our dancers like, hey, what do you guys need? What do you want? Like we don't need to keep doing this Math Methods project if it's going to be stressful. Like we would rather create a community space than try to produce work. And I wasn't expecting people to be like, yeah, let's make a film. And everyone was kind of like, yeah, I'd rather have something to focus on. And John, our collaborator, had just written a supplement to his textbook that our project is interpreting through dance. He had just written a supplement for the SIR model for infectious disease, and he ended up giving a lecture to us that he had given to his class earlier that week, and the dancers kind of ran with it. Lisa, do you want to talk more about like the movement generation part?
Yeah, so we kept true to our mission statement and what we love, which is collaboration and improvisation. So each section meant something, and then from there we sort of calculated how it would go together with the SIR model and depict that through dancing and sort of share both sides, science and dance, of something that's happening so close to our hearts right now. So it was really cool. I mean, me and science and math, not much of a mix, but dancing it like really helped me get into it and want to learn about it and I don't know, just like understand it, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of our dancers are just starting to understand math, and I'm like, this is great.
It kind of reminded me of like the Dance Your PhD thing, right? Like where like the whole point is to make science or STEM, you know, more accessible to the average person. And so, yeah, like adding that visual, I thought was just like so great.
But you also made everything so tangible and not scary. Like this whole concept I felt like was so like, I felt enlightened and I wanted to learn more, but I wasn't like, oh, this is overwhelming. I was like, more, like so visually captivating. Like we have so many comments coming in of people just saying like your editing and filming is incredible. So like those 2 weeks of stress were definitely worth it.
Thank you. And I will say all of our dancers filmed themselves, so I can't take credit for what they did. They handed me videos, I just put it in a grid. And I think that a big portion of what we were learning was, this is what landscape means. This is where you need to place your camera so that you can get your entire body in the shot and not just your ankles.
Definitely important.
That's something new that a lot of us need to learn though now, right? Because I mean, I feel like video is going to become, I mean, we can get into a whole conversation about this, but I feel like video is going to become a much bigger part of what we do. So landscape versus portrait is definitely step one.
And we're happy to help if anyone wants help with editing. I'm happy to set up Zoom times to chat about dance and film.
You should do a workshop. You should 100% do an editing workshop. You will have many attendees.
I can do that.
I will sign up.
I'll start putting that together.
We all need to learn. And we just want to say also, like, if anyone who is watching has questions, like, put them in the chat box and we will totally get to all of them throughout. We're going through a couple of the questions we had for the artists first, but we're going to get to all of the ones that we have in the chat box. So keep them coming. We will get to all of them.
So I want to pivot now. I mean, you know, collaboration again was a huge component of the whole point of this show. And a really exciting collaboration was between Gracie and Azeb. And I was so, I mean, you know, Azeb, you've worked with OnStage before on a couple of different projects, so I was really excited to see you now work with Gracie and create this new piece together. So I'm curious first, like, Azeb, if you can talk about the experience of that partnership and that collaborative process, and, you know, anything that you want to share about the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So yeah, this piece, Becoming an Activist, an Allyship Project, was definitely a very raw, emotional, heavy piece for us to put together collaboratively. Honestly, at the beginning of the kind of peak of protests in the country, when it was all about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and it still is about them, but when it was really at its peak, when we were all still kind of in tighter quarters and quarantine, Gracie reached out to me and was like, hey, I really want to like do some work around this. And I know that you have experience around this, creating pieces on racism, and I feel like we could figure something out. And so we were very methodical in how we were going to come about even just the idea, because, you know, we're talking about people's personal experiences with racism, and that's a like very sensitive topic for most folks. And so for me, I was like, okay, I'm a Black woman working with a group of predominantly white women. And I was like, how do we go about talking about this while being authentic to their perspectives and also to like my perspective as a Black woman experiencing racism every single day of my life. And so in our one-on-ones, in our big group meetings, you know, I put together playlists of just kind of like TED Talks, and we would just like debrief them and talk about like what that meant to us, right? And for the ones that really stood out to us, we were like, all right, cool, let's see how we move to this. I think it's also important to consider what your role in allyship and activism is, right? So just kind of understanding, like, first of all, what do those words even mean to you? And also just resonating with the different types of roles and acknowledging that there are many types of roles when it comes to activism and allyship, is that there are people who are caregivers, there are people who are educators, there are people who are the writers, there are people who are behind the scenes doing the organizing, and there are people who are at the front lines protesting and putting their bodies on the street. Like, it's not just one type of way of doing this, it's a progression. It's something that you have to constantly work towards, and that's for everybody. That's not just Black versus white, that's everybody. But in this context, I thought it was really cool that we were able to, first of all, come together during a pandemic, still be able to make this work at home and cater to like people's individual needs of like what they feel comfortable with, of putting themselves like at risk and coming together in general, and also to feel inspired to create work, period. Like, I don't know about you guys, but there was a period where I was like, I genuinely do not feel inspired to create any type of work right now. And that's just me being real. I'm sure maybe you guys experience that. So I'm really grateful for Gracie just reaching out, because even the act of reaching out is something that we can do as an arts industry, especially in the dance world, is just being like, hey, first of all, how are you doing? And second of all, do you want to do stuff? And if you don't, that's cool too, you know, but if you do, I'm here. So I really appreciated like Gracie being like, I want to give you the space, especially as a woman of color in the dance world in Boston, to really like do your thing, you know? So that's just kind of how I feel about it. I know that was a lot.
No, that meant so much. I also like want to point out, like, as a little aside, so Azeb and I and Nozama, we were paired for the original Empower One Another, like in early 2020. So we were going to be doing a project together as a part of the original show. And we had our song, we had our concept, we had our first rehearsal set, we were like ready to go, and then it got canceled. And so it was from there that's how we were going to collaborate. And so that was when I kind of thought about it, and I was like, I still really want to collaborate with this girl. Like, this was meant to be, like, we've got to figure this out. So like, it was very much I was like, this feels like we've got something. So I just cannot thank you enough for what you really gave to our company and to the arts organization, and for being so real with us.
Thank you.
Gracie, can you talk more about, from your perspective of, building this piece and working with Azeb and, how that was for you and for your company members and that whole experience there?
Yeah, so I mean, Azeb really explained it very well in that we are a company of predominantly white appearing women, and we have never created a piece like this before. We've never spoken to the topic of race before, which at this point didn't feel right anymore. We wanted to create something, but we also, Nozama is always working to be creating pieces about the experiences of women, but we create from like our own perspectives. And so we wanted to figure out a way to speak to this, but in a really thoughtful, appropriate way where we weren't assuming the thought processes or the experiences of women of color, because that would have been inappropriate. But we also, a lot of us were just having these frank conversations with each other saying like, we want to do more, and and how do we start, and what's the beginning? And I feel lost, and I've been, doing some research, and I've been going to protests, and it doesn't feel like enough. And that was where, we really did frankly look like, I, called Azeb and I was like, I think that this is something that needs to be said, that like, that white women, like, that it's okay to admit that we don't quite know what to do right now and what to say right now, but we are here and we want to learn, and we don't want to rely on, but we want to start to do the work. And so that's where it was becoming an activist. It's the start. And we really also wanted to use this, our, in Nozama's experience specifically, our predominantly white audience, to ask them like, how can we start to use some self-reflection and some small acts of change to start to do the work? And it was really a beginning, and we admitted that, it's far from perfect, and it's really a start. And I'm really excited because it was the first part, and Azeb and I are working on part 2 now, and we, of how to sustain the work. But I think it was a moment where, Azeb and I had so many conversations where I was like, I just haven't really like seen this yet, and I just don't quite know yet what, like, how, like, I want to be vulnerable, but I want to tell these stories. And she was like that's awesome, like, let's start there. So it's a start, and like, I really just feel very inspired that we got this chance, and it felt like the right domain to do it. And I really appreciate all of my dancers for being so vulnerable with it. And I'm excited for part 2 and beyond.
That's funny, because my follow-up question was going to be like, oh, do you, to Azeb, I was going to say like, oh, do you see this, branching off into other projects or expanding on this initial idea? So it's cool to hear that you guys are already working on the next part of it. And I don't know, I haven't fully thought through this question, so it's going to kind of just like come out. But Azeb, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about, what your goals are in presenting this kind of work and expanding on this work, like what you personally hope to accomplish, or what you want people to take away from it. And if the piece does continue to grow and evolve, what you're hoping to say even further than this first piece.
Yeah, definitely. I think, kind of what I was saying in the beginning of how, like, this is just the start, right? Like, this is part 1. This is like the introduction, because this work is a journey. There's the first part of realizing, okay, here is a problem, and now I am aware of the problem. What am I going to do about it? When you say what I'm going to do about it, that's when you're like, there is a need to take action, hence becoming an activist. And the next part of the journey of being an activist is continuing the work, right? And it's like identifying, all right, what are my strengths and how can I contribute what I have to doing this work? In a way that's also like not harmful towards yourself, right? Because it's like, you want to do this work and continue to feel inspired to do this work and not burn yourself out or hurt yourself and like possibly hurt people that you love in the fire, right? So for me, I think there is a lot to touch upon. I think there are many versions and varieties of this piece that can and will be coming, that are going to address not just one aspect or identity, because it's so much more. Like, you can be an activist for all of the human rights issues that are going on in our country and in our world, right? So, you know, just, it applies to all of it. So my goal is kind of just like to inspire people to recognize that it is a journey and you can't stop. Once you go, just don't stop.
I love that. And if there are any questions for Azeb, please throw it out there. But I did want to give you an opportunity to plug. Are you doing a podcast? Do you have that project? I want to give you an opportunity to plug that.
Yeah, so I have a podcast with my brother. It's called The Freitas Effect. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We definitely talk about things in the arts sector, but I would say it's comical, it's light, it's mostly sharing mental health issues and just kind of advice around that topic. So if you just want to giggle, tune in to The Freitas Effect. You can find us on social media at TFE Pod on Twitter, The Freitas Effect on Instagram, wherever, on Facebook. Just look us up, or you can just hit me up, and I got you.
You got the elevator pitch down. Nice.
That was so good. Awesome. Thanks, Azeb. Oh my gosh, look at you. Put it all in here. It's perfect. Amazing. So unless we have any others, my next question, although I just lost her in the chat, was for Rachael about her work, but I feel like I lost her.
Sorry, I'm here. I keep turning the camera on and off and relocating.
No, you're so good.
The whole Brady Bunch here. It's impossible to do anything.
Oh my gosh, no, you're good. I'm excited to dive in. So I would love to hear now about your incredible work selection, and not only the process of creating it and also utilizing outdoor space, all these themes that we're talking about, but also, you know, this entire show is centered around the themes of empowerment. I'd love to hear about your work. I'd also love to hear about the partnerships you have with your work. Tell us all about it.
Okay. So selection is part of an ongoing project of mine, Zahor, which I started as a way to preserve the words of World War II Holocaust survivors through dance. And Zahor was actually going to be, I had a residency at Chelsea Theatre Works that was going to premiere an evening length work in July. Obviously, at first it got postponed. I really thought we could do it in August when it was like back in March, but we're postponed a whole year now, but it ended up being for the better because now it's just turned what would have been an evening length work show in person into a very longer, more ongoing project. And selection was just kind of part of that I found we could still do this piece in this section of the work. It didn't have to involve contact. The piece was never going to really involve contact. So we decided this piece we can still do right now to have something produced this summer. And yeah, so I started the whole project as a means to preserve the firsthand accounts of survivors, because as each year that passes, we lose more and more Holocaust survivors, the few who are remaining and are alive to tell their stories. And the people who share their stories, that's a very hard memory to have to relive, and especially more well-known survivors who speak a lot, they have to relive it over and over, and they're doing it, but not because it's easy to relive that, but it's out of a human responsibility that we have to be studying these stories. We have to hear them and we have to remember them. And most importantly, we have to not forget. And another goal in creating this project was to target a more diverse audience with Holocaust education in a way that wasn't necessarily religious-centric, a non-religious-centric form of Holocaust education. And I found that dance could be a way to make that more accessible and resonant to a wider audience. Because I feel like we all hold that responsibility to hear these stories, to study these stories, and to remember them. if we can prevent history from repeating itself, which we see it all the time. It's not like so that history does not repeat itself. We see it all the time, and we need to hold that responsibility. Yeah, so that's a bit about the work and creating it. We did create it. All the choreography was done on Zoom, and then we went in person to the New England Holocaust Memorial. That's where the film was made. We did like 3 in-person social distant rehearsals. Another thing, like I said, it's been postponed, and it actually ended up being a good thing because now this can be a more in-depth project. I also found that creating this work on Zoom, it's almost like you have more rehearsal time. No one has to commute anywhere. They do it from the comfort of their home. Scheduling's easier because there's so much that doesn't go into it. So something that was really important that we were able to do is I was able to take the time to really translate all of my research and the work I was doing as a choreographer to my dancers. And it was very important that if they were working with these stories, they knew the stories. They knew exactly which gestures came from and why I chose to do them. And I feel like so often in the dance world, in the hustle and bustle of things, we're not afforded that luxury, especially when we're working with limited budgets. It's how much time can you really ask of people to be in rehearsal? And we gained this additional time with this new method of rehearsal, and it was really interesting to get to talk with the dancers and make sure they really understood the stories they were working with. And it was shown so clearly, I feel, in the embodiment that the dancers did of these stories, and their dedication to the work, for sure. Sorry, that was a long rambling. Hopefully the questions were answered in there.
No, that was fantastic.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I when I first saw that, and I was familiar with the location where you performed, and for anyone who's not familiar, like the smoke comes out of the memorial at all times, and so I thought using that particular space and the energy that is already naturally there, I thought was really powerful. And then on top of that, obviously you couldn't have planned for this, but it rained when you were filming. So I was just really curious about what your thought process was around that, because I thought that was just like, I don't know if you thought it was bad or good, but
it was beautiful.
Beautiful. Like the fact that it rained, I thought added this element that just made it that much more powerful. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, the rain, the weather was one thing, and I've been working outside this summer too to keep good protocols, and we had a weird summer here in Boston where it always say it was gonna rain, and then it didn't, and if it did, it rained for like a minute and it stopped, and it was a huge blessing for anyone who's been working outside. Like, what a blessing. And then this is my first time, creating this film was my first time ever producing my own work or directing my own work, and kept on checking the weather, and it wasn't looking good. It jumped back and forth, but it looked like it was going to hold off, or at least we could film for like 2 of the 4 hours we had allotted. So we went ahead and we did it on that Sunday we were filming. We got a few good runs in, and then it just starts downpouring on us like nothing I've seen yet this summer, because the rain had been so mild. But no, like within a minute, the streets downtown were flooding. So we're all in cover, and I'm just thinking to myself, Rachel, your first time being in charge. Like, I didn't even know how to call it, to be honest, because I was not used to calling anything. And we were actually about to just go with our rain date and be like, well, unfortunately, we're gonna have to come back next Sunday and keep filming. And one of the dancers, who I knew she couldn't make the rain date, was like, do you want me to just quickly do my little solo part out in the rain? And I was like, you're nuts, but sure. And so me and the videographer and this one dancer went out in the rain, and she just like jumped in, and we're like, oh my God, it is just so intense. And slowly all the dancers came over just to like film what was going on. And I was like, any of you guys, like, if you don't have to, please, you don't have to get in the rain, but if you're interested in doing it, like the footage, it'll be pretty cool for sure. and they all jumped in. They were so on board and flexible. So we ended up filming the whole thing in the rain. We didn't even use any of the non-rain shots for consistency, but that was like the biggest surprise, and just like, it wouldn't have happened unless the dancers were so on board to jump in. But it definitely adds in. One of the dancers after filming, she said to me, like, lying on the ground doing this piece in the freezing cold rain added such a sense of vulnerability for her as a performer. And that was really, that really stuck with me. But yeah, no, the rain was not planned, not welcomed at first, but I definitely happened, it all happened for a reason.
One of many examples, I think, of how we as artists have been pivoting and adapting through these past 6 months, right? Like, that's the ultimate example.
Oh my gosh. And
yes, that's so funny that you say that. I remember telling them, I was like, because I always kept telling them throughout the process, we were going to do a show, we were going to postpone the show a month, we were going to rehearse in person, we were going to rehearse in Zoom, and I was like, thank you so much for pivoting. Like, every email started with that. And then they start dancing in the rain, and I'm like, you are pas de bourrée, pivot, turn, step, pirouette. Like, it was just beyond a pivot at that point.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait. I was just reading the chat how I'm now too so excited to rewatch it knowing this background. And Julie just commented that she thought it was totally intentional performing outside in the rain without the shoes, and that it just made the message so much more powerful. So you should be like, it was totally, I timed the rain at the exact time.
Been looking for the rain.
Oh my gosh. It was just so beautiful. It really, like, incredibly powerful work. Like, just above and beyond stunning.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And then anyone else have any questions or anything for Rachel? And then all right. Well, I do, actually, before because I was going to dive into asking about some of the pieces that were pre-recorded that were included. So I will be asking Jen about her pieces next, but really quick before, Rachel and Emily, I'd love to hear a little bit for your compilation that you filmed, since again, filming outside, all of the elements. Did you experience some of these unpredictable things? How was your filming experience?
Oh, actually, wow, it's very funny you mentioned this, because the whole time I wasn't thinking we had anything inconvenient happen. But so the first time we filmed it in 2 days. First time it was just me. That first half was just me out in the West Hartford Reservoir in Connecticut. And I think it was like 95 degrees. And I did like, I think 100 soda shots after not doing like I was dancing for like 4 hours out there with him. Like, I don't know if you can tell, sometimes you can see my sweat on my dress. Like, that was one thing, like, it was just so hot. But I really Rachel was saying, like, all her dancers were so willing to dance in the rain. Like, I would have danced out there for longer in the heat. Like, I would have danced out there in the rain. I would in the snow if it snowed. Like right now everyone just wants to dance. And like, I can totally see why they were like, so willing and able. And like that rain was meant to happen. Like, like that was like supposed to be happening in the whole, to go with your piece. Like, that was, maybe, you didn't realize it, but that was supposed to happen. And then like the heat and like just the raw sun made just such the difference on our behalf, because that's what our breath of fresh air called for. Whereas like your piece called for the rain, like that whole setting, it called for the rain. And then, so on the second day, there was, most everyone's from the Boston, Connecticut area, New England area. And that week we had that tropical storm, whoever, I don't remember the name, that came through. The whole state of Connecticut was like out of power. There's like thousands of trees that were down, and we were supposed to be filming inside. We were going to be filming inside of the gallery of the photographer, and he texted me when I was on my way there, because I was an hour away. So he texted me like 45 minutes before we were supposed to be there. The power's out, bring sneakers, we're going to go outside. And like, I didn't have sneakers. We threw on our ballet shoes, and like the dancers didn't know either that the power was going to be out. So, because the second time I had 2 dancers join me. And so we ended up going outside again. And I think that made the difference too. I I really liked that it had to continue outside. I'm happy that we didn't go inside, I guess.
I thought it was totally planned that it was all outside. It was so beautiful, the sun and the first shot, and I was just like I thought it was totally intentional.
Yeah, all the choreography was very much like you said, Gracie, like opening to the sun, like almost like, you know, you were supposed to be with the elements. So that's interesting.
Yeah, because some pieces are meant to be filmed in the sun and some are meant to be filmed in the rain, and then I don't know, we'll see, maybe some are meant to be filmed in the snow, but you know, we'll get there. I'm not psyched. All right, so thank you so much. So I would love to pivot into asking our artists a little bit about the pieces that were previously recorded from past projects, but that were so fitting for the show. So that includes Jen and Dana and Katie. So I'll start with Jen. I would love to hear, so you had your 2 works that you included, and I would love to kind of hear a little bit about why you picked those 2 works, because you had, I think you had like a couple of pieces of on stages you could have picked. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I mean, by now I've been running on stage for 10 years, so I probably have about 50 pieces I could have picked from. But yeah, it's funny that Azeb mentioned earlier, you know, the struggle to create, because, you know, when she was saying that, I was just like shaking my head so aggressively because I felt that so much. And, you know, when we decided to pivot to the virtual, my first thought always is like, create something new. And, you know, as the pandemic continued and quarantine continued, I just couldn't create new work. And I admire all of you guys who were able to do that. But for me, like, nothing was coming, you know. I mean, I would teach like a virtual class and do like a little combo or a little whatever, but I would have all these ideas for things, and I just couldn't get past the initial idea, you know. It was just the whole experience felt really overwhelming. And, you know, I took a step back and I thought, well, okay, I already have like, you know, hundreds of pieces, I feel like, that I could share. And, you know, a lot of them have been seen, you know, by an insulated, like our OnStage core kind of audience group of, you know, friends and family, people who are familiar with that. And so I was like, this is an opportunity to show that work to a brand new group of people. So, okay, long story short. So I went with the OnStage piece I did last year called Angel by the Wings, because that one grew out of me sort of wanting to make a thank you piece to the people in my life that really lifted me up out of a really dark place. And given everything that was going on, you know, even though I'm not in that place anymore, I felt like it was just so appropriate to the time of, you know, how, when things are really hard, how we get through all of that with the people we choose to get through it with, right? Our friends, our family, our communities. So really, that piece was really meant to be very celebratory, and celebrating those relationships and how empowering they can be, and you know, just how they get you through. So that's where, you know, my thought was to introduce that piece into the show. And then my other one, I knew I had to include something from What Is Love, because that show is just, you know, my full heart on display. And, you know, as you can see, Nicole and Lisa were original cast members in that show. And that show just means the world to me. It's just so close to my heart. And the opening piece has always been one of my favorites of the show, because it really is, and it was intended to be, a slap in the face to the audience. You know, they go and they expect this really like pretty, you know, romantic show, and then the very first piece is like, you know, and like dancers flat against the wall, like bugs on a windshield. And
I like how 2020 has felt sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Welcome to 2020. You know, and you know, the whole concept of that piece was, you know, what does it mean to be your total authentic self, your weird, quirky, unique, you know, out of the box, what makes you the weirdo that you are, but how do you embrace that and be proud of that and love that? And on the flip side, it asks the audience to consider, you know, how we judge other people, how we label other people, how we can look at folks and make assumptions about, you know, who they are or what kind of person they are. And so sort of showing that from both sides. And so again, I felt like, you know, given the theme of empowerment and of, you know, what we're trying to say right now, given everything that's happening, I felt like both of those were really appropriate kind of for different reasons.
They were perfect. No, excellent choices. But yes, I am so glad you included a piece from What Is Love, and
I just wanted to comment because I see Allison made a comment about that I taught that choreography at your Uplift workshop.
Yeah, you did.
Actually, the piece actually grew out of that workshop. So I created that combination to teach for the Nozama class, and I just really loved it, and I wanted to expand on it. And so I'm really grateful that you gave me the opportunity to teach that day, because the piece definitely grew out of that experience.
I thought it went the other way around, so that's awesome. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like those phrases that we like do in class, and we're like, I actually like really liked that. I'm like,
I mean, sometimes
awesome.
it's like a throwaway just for the day, and sometimes you're like, I want to go back and explore that and see if there's something else there.
That's awesome. Well, yay. And then, all right, so we saw a couple of other pieces that were filmed in your beautiful studio, Katie's being one of them, Reflection, which, as Katie and Dana mentioned, those were created during your residency. Do you want to give us a quick little bit about what that residency is?
Yes, absolutely. So I like feel like emotional now, because my darling studio has been closed since March, and I'm not sure yet when it'll open, if it'll open. But the residency program grew out of me acquiring my own studio and really wanting to be a resource for dancers and choreographers and dance company directors who, you know, I mean, it's really expensive to hold rehearsals and hold shows and do all those things. And, you know, I thought I had the space and I had the opportunity to offer that to people, and I want to see what could grow out of it. And I think by this point, we've done at least like maybe 6 or 7, maybe more rounds of the residency program. And so many
Evolve was from the residency?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you were like were you the first one?
Yeah, I think we were the first season, and that was our first time making a piece with more than just Lisa and I.
Yeah, so like so many of you who are on this call right now, you know, have interacted with the residency in some way, and it's been a great opportunity for me to connect with so many new people that I wouldn't have otherwise met, and build partnerships that would, you know, become other collaborations later on. A lot of people who come through the residency go on to perform in other things that OnStage produces. So yeah, I'm hoping that I'll be able to offer that again, hopefully soon. We'll see kind of how things develop. But yeah, I was so excited to see, you know, works that, you know, were born out of the residency showcased here today. That was really exciting and really sweet to see.
And as Madison just said, that space was a part of a larger piece about women in science that was developing in this season's residency. So,
well, unfortunately, yeah, Madison was like the cohort that I think maybe you got a week, maybe or 2 in the studio, perhaps.
It was the 3rd week. I called, like, let's not have rehearsal this weekend, just in case, like, we'll be back in a week. Mm-hmm. And that was like the March 13th weekend, where everything just kind of shut down after that.
Yeah, and I was telling her, I was like, okay, let's take like a week or 2 off, and we'll reassess, and we'll just, you know, push things back. And
it was like a couple weeks ago, I emailed Jen. I was like, I still have your studio key.
Everybody still has my studio keys. I literally, the studio has been closed for 6 months, and the keys are like all over the city. I have no idea.
I still have it. Just reassuring.
But yes, so Katie, tell us about your experience and what led you to pick this piece for this show.
So I choreographed this piece actually a few years ago. And interestingly enough, it was actually initially designed to have 2 people representing one person who is working through and breaking free of their self-perceived limitations. But I was rewatching it, you know, obviously through the lens of everything that's been going on through the pandemic. And I liked it so much more thinking about it as a relationship between two people, you know, maybe family members or friends or something like that. But something I've been really leaning into the past few months is the importance of support from one another, and what a difference that can make, having support from your friends, from your family to help you through everything that's been going on. And so watching the piece through that lens, I just felt like that was totally there. And the two dancers have this beautiful relationship dancing with each other, and there's struggle and there's some messiness, and there comes out of it this beautiful resolution where you can tell that they've really grown throughout the piece. And I think you see a sense of wholeness, a sense of healing that's come from it. So that's why I decided to submit this piece.
Oh, I love it. It was definitely I think wholesome is definitely a word, and you don't often, you know, I think I definitely as a choreographer often tend to the more like raw, like emotional, like heavy side of things, but for you to look at it from a lens of like what is very uplifting and wholesome, it was just like, it was very much needed in this show, and it was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing it. And then Dana, as one of the dancers in that duet and who also submitted your own piece, I'd love to hear about your connection to all these works. It's a loaded multi-part question.
Yeah, wow. I feel very grateful kind of when I saw the whole show come together. I'm in Becoming an Activist with Nozama and Azeb. I last minute became a part of Space by Madison, which was such a wonderful experience. That was my first time being in person with people dancing after 6 months. So it was just like a very wonderful day to be in a space with people dancing. And then, Katie and I met through her being in my piece and me being in her piece. That was actually the first thing that I ever did in Boston as a dancer and choreographer. So I just feel like overwhelmed and grateful to have been a part of all of these amazing things. Yeah.
And so then what made you pick Mother Tongues for your particular piece to share tonight?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, thinking about empowering one another and collaboration and all of this stuff, that piece, I never really thought of it as a finished product. I thought of it as the many parts of process that we used to get there. I really tried to take advantage of the fact that I did have this free space to use in this time, and I didn't want to just focus on, okay, what can I put together to present at a show, but more so, how can I use this space as a choreographer and creator to experiment and just throw stuff out there and kind of see what happens. But I asked a lot of the dancers. We journaled, we created our own little nuggets of movement. I asked them to do some fun and strange collaborative ways of creation in the space. So I asked a lot of them in order to make the piece. So just thinking about that element of collaboration and empowering one another, that piece would have been a completely different piece with a completely different cast of dancers, if that makes sense, because they put so much of themselves into the work.
It just came together so beautifully, as Rachel said, just a really incredible, empowering work.
It was cool from again, thinking about from the video perspective, because I'm assuming that you didn't have a video project in mind when you were working on that, although maybe you did, I'm not sure. But I love the way that you use the editing and the different cuts of, the close-ups versus the wide shots. And I was thinking, I don't know if she planned this at the time, because she couldn't have known this was going to be for a virtual show, but I love that you were able to get the piece in the studio from so many different angles, and then were really thoughtful about how you edited it to show it in the way that you presented it.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I never knew that having that piece on film would be very relevant a few years later. But it was kind of, you know, I've been a part of a few companies. I've run companies. I've been a company member on many companies, but I've often been creating work for other people, or specifically for like a show that's looming, and you know, you have to create something that gets finished and then move on from it, or something like that. So for me, it was really about falling in love with the process again. And then, you know, thinking of the dance world as marketplace, having something that is very reflective of the work that I was now interested in doing kind of on my own. So I really, really wanted to get a good take of it on video so that I could, you know, let's say if I was submitting for an opportunity to choreograph for something, or you know, anything else out there. I know that the Boston dance scene, it has so many opportunities, but can also be so hard to break into and kind of figure out what your place is within it. So yeah, I actually made a point of our whole last rehearsal, I was filming a variety of angles, and like you said, and everything like that, and edited that so that I could have it to say, you know, this is who I am now as a creator.
Love that. And this is sort of a pretty good segue to a question that was asked earlier in the chat by Julie. And I'm gonna take her question, but also kind of add to it a little bit, because I've been having a lot of conversations with artists lately, and I've mentioned already on this in this call about how, you know, this experience with the quarantine and pandemic and utilizing Zoom rehearsals and video projects and all that has really influenced and changed, I think, the way that we approach choreography and the way that we approach creating work. And in addition to that, thinking about how going forward it's going to influence, right? Like I personally can't imagine we've taken on these new avenues of creativity and now we're just going to go back to normal and then let them go, right? I feel like it's going to be a part of our creative process in some way going forward. So I'm curious, and this is open for everybody, of how this experience with the pandemic and new ways of creating, how that has impacted you or affected your process, and how you think it will change that for you going forward. And that's sort of open to everybody, so feel free to.
Yeah, Madison, go for it.
This is particularly interesting with space, because space lived in my brain for a good year and a half or so before it actually got to see a stage and audience. What's really interesting is the video added such a great opportunity for me to create an effect that I was going to have to kind of make up on a stage. So I wanted at the end of the piece for it to feel like a spacewalk and to have a levity and anti-gravity feeling. It was going to be done through a lift and supporting each other, and it was going to be very like literal symbolic kind of situation. But with video, I was able to actually be like, hey, Brittany, our videographer, and I got her to be like, let's just slow it down and make it look like we actually don't have gravity, because you can. And for other projects that I'm like mentally working on and haven't even planned a date to show them yet, but I've seen more opportunities to incorporate technology and video because it's way more accessible and way more accepted at this point, where I'm not trying to prepare a piece for a stage, I am preparing it for a digital world. And for video viewing and online viewing, I can kind of, like, there is no other expectation, no other thing that's pulling my attention away from experimenting with these things. It's a really cool opportunity, and I think staging starts becoming a much more like, oh, I don't have to, you don't have to walk from point A to point B, you can just appear in point B if you want to. It's very, very fun as a choreographer and someone who's playing with staging, kind of establishing what I want to do with that.
Yeah, Nicole.
So we in Evolve kind of have two big projects that we've been working on the past, I guess, over a year now. We have our Math Methods project, which you guys saw, but we also do work in the realm of mental health advocacy, and we've worked with Jen and Gracie before on those things. And we are actually currently, and this is also a little bit of a plug, but we want you guys to be involved in this. We're currently putting together a community-based dance film about hands and how COVID has affected our hand movements and also our mental health. There's If you go to our website, we have a form where you can read through the prompt and what the idea is, and also see a little bit of our work in terms of mental health. And then you can submit stories based on what you've been going through, and you can film your hands, choreograph, improv, whatever you want. And the film is going to be projected onto the side of the dance complex later this fall for a community gathering, but socially distant event. And we really want everyone to be involved, so please share. We were so inspired by everything you guys have created, and we'd love to work with you. So that's how we've been approaching it. We've been trying to be as collaborative as possible and reach out of these boxes. I just got really excited.
No,
Sorry.
I'm so excited. I love it. I'm
so excited about that project. I think it's so unique and cool. And again, Grace and I love collaboration. So this being just so massive in its reach, I think is so exciting.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. If either of you want to put in like your website, go in the chat so people can check that out, because that would be awesome to get everybody involved in that. Any other thoughts that we want to share about kind of what we're talking about here with the video or technology influence, or really anything
or even just like other new like skills that you have had to pick up? For example, I was talking to Dana about how like I learned where iMovie is on my iPad, and now I've been figuring out how to edit. Like all these new skills that we have that, like, I think that, to your point, they're not just going to go away. That I think that we're just going to keep building and growing and adding to these skills, and going to Nicole's workshops, and she's going to teach us how to edit. And, I think this is all really exciting. And we wanted to kind of show that, like, through this show, that like, there's going to be life after this. There's going to be creation after this, whether it's using old pieces that we have that we're revitalizing, or we're creating new ones. Like there is a future and a world for dance, and like, we're going to do this together.
And there's no excuses. Everyone can watch dance now.
Everyone can watch dance now.
Thank you for saying that. That was sort of our tagline when, OnStage did a virtual show last week, and that was sort of our tagline. It was like, quote, "You have no excuse," because you could watch them anywhere. So you can do the whole like, "Oh, it's so far away, I can't get there."
Yeah, my couch is so far away from where I've been sitting, my bed.
I wanted to add, Gracie, because you mentioned something about revisiting old pieces, and this is a conversation I actually had a while back with Karen and Nicole of Monkey House, and we were talking about how we as choreographers, we have this sort of nonsensical view that we need to create new work like every 2 seconds, and for every showcase that comes out, we have to create something new. And if we were talking about how if you really step back, when you created piece A, like how many people actually saw it, right? Like, maybe a nice amount, but like, I'm sure if in show B, like, you're going to introduce that same piece to a whole new audience. And really my point of bringing this up is that I think that by introducing more video or virtual experiences, I want people to sort of think about how they can reintroduce old work that now can be seen by a whole new audience that never experienced it the first time. And step away from that feeling of like, well, I created it, it's old now, I have to put it away and move on to something else. I think that there's something to be said about revisiting stuff that we've done and seeing what we can do with it now. Yes, pull out your OnStage residency video. I'm curious, I want to see it again. But yeah, like Dana, that was a great example of how you took the video from all these angles, and now years later, you created sort of a whole new entity out of that original piece, and we're able to put it in a new way. So I wonder if, the rest of us can kind of do that, or think about doing that going forward, or looking back and seeing how we can do that with whole work. So that was something I wanted to throw out there because I felt like it.
Yeah, Rachel.
I'm cycling back to something a moment ago that you had asked, about like, I don't know, just digital or other like impacts on our work now with this, because for so long it felt like once this passes, once things resume, but it really doesn't feel like that anymore. And it just, even having stuff planned a year from now, it's like, well, it's probably gonna still be really different. And one thing as an artist that I've been really, something I think about a lot is like, but what about partnering? And contact improvisation used to be like a huge way in how I created work. And I mean, who knows when we can do something like that again. But something I thought watching the second piece, Astronaut, like what immediately stood out to me, because it's been on my mind so much as an artist, the shadows in that work. And you had a lot of bodies in the space. Like the cast was a big cast, but watching it almost doubled because of those shadows. And it just immediately made me think of like partnering with the shadows and how that adds such an interesting dynamic, and it adds an interesting relationship with the dancers and the piece. But it definitely, and I know you said earlier too, you like, you've been frustrated trying to create new work during this time, but very much still the work you showed inspired a lot of thoughts for me as an artist during this time, as we work to like adapt to like, well, what is our new normal going to be, and how could we create relationships on stage now that we have to be 6 feet and we have to be not contacting. But that was really interesting. It was really, really beautiful.
Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate that. And it's so cool too. And I mean, this is kind of why I love these Q&A things, because a lot of times it makes you see your own work in different ways, you know, by hearing feedback from other people or questions or things. I don't even think I thought about the shadow in that way, you know. I probably at one point said like, oh, that's cool, like that's visually nice, but that's really cool. It makes me want to kind of go back and look at something.
Yeah, it like doubled the cast for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but like when it comes to partnering, like I am feeling it, because right before 2020, a huge initiative of Nozama was to integrate more partnering and more women in the partnering that we were doing, and we had like built a lot of pieces around it. Next week, my co-director and I are filming a duet, and we were both getting tested before just to be able to do it, because it is entirely partnering, and we were like, we're gonna figure out a way, but like we have to time that, and all of the rest of our pieces we removed the partnering that we're doing. So I like really don't have an answer for that one, but it's been a big thing I've been thinking about, and like we should definitely like keep conversations going about how artists are going to be adapting, because like for a company where like it was a backbone, it's a huge pillar of our work, and like something that we were really working a lot on and putting a lot of effort into. And so to have that kind of go away, it feels like it's an exciting challenge to now figure out how to show those relationships in a new way. But it also feels like, man, we have like something really great going, but we'll have those videos that we'll, you know, pull out when it's safe again and rework on them. But you know, definitely something that I think will be part of an ongoing conversation of like, how are artists adapting? Because I sure don't know.
If anyone else has any thoughts on this or anything else, please feel free to chime in. And if anybody who's watching has any questions and wants to submit those, please do. But I think that, you know, barring that, we'll sort of wrap up by going around, and if everybody just wants to share final thoughts and anything we should be keeping an eye out on. So some of you already mentioned some works that you have coming up, and so if you want to plug those again, or you know, let us know anything about what you have coming up that we should keep an eye on.
Well, I will start for Nozama. We're going to be doing a virtual show of our work that's going to come out in December. That again, we're going to be filming a lot of next week, so let's pray for the weather to be what it should be that day. And then stay tuned, because also later in the coming months, we're going to have a really exciting announcement that we have a lot of big shifts coming, many of which also are going to involve Dana, who's here. So we're very excited for a lot of announcements with Nozama to come in the coming months. So stay tuned.
I'll just call Rachel and Emily. Do you want to share anything that we could keep an eye out on?
Yeah, so our next big well, it's really our first big show, is a gala that we're doing. So it's a hybrid event, and we're doing it at, or it's hosted by a local distillery called Hartford Flavor Company. And so we'll have about 20-ish, 25 in-person tickets. And then we'll be doing a live stream of some pieces that our artistic advisor is creating. His name's Christopher Fleming, and he was like one of my mentors as I started my ballet career. He was a dancer for City Ballet back in the 70s. So it's very Balanchine-esque. So that's our big first show. It'll be October 25th on a Sunday. So if you can join us, we would love to see you. And then we have lots of other exciting projects coming up. We're working on a holiday-themed video that's not the Nutcracker. We're really excited about that. It's the Fantastic Toy Shop, which we'll be doing in a site-specific location, like a warehouse, I think. And then do you want to talk about the spring a little bit?
Yeah, the spring, so back when we were planning our season before, whatever, we planned 4 main stage shows, and one of the ones in the spring was going to be, we're still hoping to do it in person, but like we were saying, how we're adapting, we do want to do some kind of like aspects of virtual, whether that means we're just going to live stream it or provide like little videos. But the first show we're going to do in March is a fundraising event for a domestic violence shelter that we will choose coming up soon, because that's something near and dear to my heart. And we'll have 4, it's in March, so it's for International Women's Month, and we're going to have 4 women choreographers that we still haven't chosen yet. So we're still,
we're so excited about that.
We're really excited to continue looking for choreographers in the area. And
that's awesome. Well, email us the information, and we'll be sure to get it out and keep everyone informed. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Rachel, so you're going to be continuing with your larger work, right?
Yes, I am. Now we're scheduled to do an evening length work at the end of June this year. We'll see, may pivot and do the whole thing in a virtual way. And maybe creating a few more films over the course of this year. Recently applied to something that I have my fingers crossed for, but I can send a little info. I recently changed my website a little bit for something, but somewhere on my website, if you're interested, you can give me your email and I'll plug all things, but you can see a little more work under this project here if you're curious. Yeah, thanks for letting me be part of this. It's a really cool opportunity to meet all of you on Zoom tonight and feel like even amidst all this, I'm expanding my community and able to meet more people in the Boston dance community.
Awesome.
Madison, did you?
Good for me. Okay. I'm really excited to be working on a piece that's actually a collaboration between me and a local musician, Sarah Zimmer. We created a piece of music around the theme of checking in and hello, how are we? Kind of seeing how everyone's doing, kind of reflecting on that quarantine text and check-in chain that everyone got started in, and like making sure everyone's feeling all right, and how do you respond to people's asking if you're okay in a time when half the time you are okay and half the time you might not be okay. But we've created a piece of music, and we're now creating a piece of performance site-specific piece that's going to be outdoors, either October 17th or 18th, pending weather, although this conversation implies that maybe the weather doesn't need to cooperate entirely. So that'll be later in October, but we're in the midst of rehearsals and working on that through Zoom. But it'll be live streamed, maybe depending people and weather in person. We'll see how it goes, but that'll be in Lower Alston of Boston. So stay tuned, and I'll drop a website link so you can kind of stay updated on information and read more about it.
Yes, everyone drop all of your websites, your social media handles. We want to keep, we will send out a post after, just kind of tagging everyone to be like, check out these amazing artists and what they're doing. Anything else before we wrap up for tonight?
I just want to say thank you both for organizing this. We all really appreciate it.
No, thank you for being a part of it. This is honestly just Jen and I's dream, is to bring artists together and to not feel, one big thing that we started was saying, like, being a director is really hard, and being a director, especially in these times when you're making new decisions, and I'm assuming we all are not making tons of money being dance directors and artists right now, and so we probably have 1 to 2 to 7 other jobs, and managing, you know, all of the ups and downs and emotional roller coasters that have come. Being a director is hard, and being able to work with other artists to acknowledge, like, this is tough, but we're here for each other, and not just be like, I have to make this work for my company and my company only. Like, the more that we can all work together and share resources and be here for each other, like, the stronger we're all going to be. So that's where we really want to, you know, get your companies out there to post about each other, to share our works, to be a part of each other's awesome projects, to make it more collaborative, all very good things.
I'd love to add 2 things to that. So the first is that as part of Empower, this is the first time that we added the webinar series. If any of you haven't had a chance to see it yet, Gracie and I co-hosted 3 webinars as part of this. And the first was about being a dance company director. But I think it also applies as an independent choreographer as well. So we talked a lot about, you know, establishing your company and all the things that go into that, and decisions that you need to consider and make. And then the second one was all about funding and fundraising, and you know, how to manage that, what to look for, how to make those things happen. So both of those webinars are on the same website where this video was. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that. Again, for both company directors and independent artists, to just learn more about, you know, how you can develop your projects. We do have funding from the Malden Cultural Council for this, and I think we're going to be applying again for funding for next year. So I just wanted to ask that if you did have a positive experience with this and enjoyed this programming, if you want to shoot them a message at Malden Culture and let them know that, so that, you know, they know that Gracie and I are doing this work in the community and are, you know, more likely to fund us the next time around, and hopefully for even more funding. That would be really cool too, and we're happy to do the same for you as well.
Yes.
If you have any funding places that you need a little feedback, reference, anything like that, happy to do that.
Yes, if anybody is also if you're applying your work to another festival or performance or grant, and you need a little blurb from other artists who have seen it, or, you know, anyone, like, hit up anyone here, because now we've all seen each other's amazing work and we can be voices for each other. So send out those emails. I think on that note, we're going to wrap up for tonight. This is going to be available. The performance is going to be available until 10 p.m. on Monday. So if any of your friends or family didn't get a chance to watch it tonight, it's available all day tomorrow, and then all day Monday. They just, same way to view, click it, you know, pay for their ticket and view. And then this Q&A will be available underneath now, and we'll keep these awesome conversations going. Thank you all for being a part of this.
Thank you all so much.
That's awesome.
Hey.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your weekends.